Well, if you were to add up all of the arguments with your spouse in a year, would it add up to 3 days of arguing straight? Hopefully not. But if that is you and you got some toxic behaviors, we're going to talk about today how to replace those toxic behaviors with healthy behaviors. And also today, on our Bad Doctrine of the Week, we're going to talk about should we cancel church for sporting events? Maybe, maybe not. All that today on the Digging Deeper podcast. Well, hello. Welcome to the Digging Deeper podcast. We are so glad that y'all joined us here today. Our goal in this podcast is to dig a little bit deeper into that week's sermon, so that way we might dig it a little bit deeper into our hearts. We're glad that y'all joined us. My name is Chris Brown. I'm the associate pastor here at First Baptist Hazel.
My name is Jacob Belding. I'm the Connections Minister here at First Baptist Hazel.
And on sound / production / general coolness,
me, Judah. Hello, everyone.
Alrighty. How are y'all doing?
Doing good. No major complaints today.
Okay.
Yet.
That's good. So. Yeah, especially with a lazy boy on its way.
Yeah, that's right.
Just in case you didn't know, he's having a lazy boy chair delivered today, so if he has to leave, that's why. All right, well, we are glad that y'all joined us here today. Before I forget, always forget, if you haven't yet, like, subscribe, comment, do all those things below, just so that way YouTube, Facebook, wherever you're listening to, knows that you enjoy this content and want to see more of it, and we love to see you more. So let us know what you think about things going on down in the comments. We love to read them. Anyways, this week, the sermon, Pastor Lee did a continuation of last week's sermon. If you tuned in, last week was all about how do you reset your relationships without replacing or ruining your current relationships. And he decided, I think we mentioned this in our podcast, that this could be a sermon series.
Yeah, we did.
And maybe he listened to it. I don't know if he listened to it. And he's like, that's a really good idea. But he actually decided to keep going with it. So I don't know if this will be a full-blown series or if he's just doing a part 2. But anyways, this past Sunday, he did How to Reset Your Relationships Part 2. More specifically, it's how replacing toxic behaviors with healthy ones. So he gave some statistics at the beginning. I don't know if y'all caught those, but
yep.
He said on average, couples have 182 arguments per year, and each dispute lasts on an average of 25 minutes. Now, that's not the case with me. I have the perfect marriage. Randy, I love you. Is that the case with you?
What? The not having a perfect relationship or having an average of 182 arguments per year on average?
I set a trap.
Yes.
So no matter how you answer, I can just switch it the other way.
Well, 182 arguments per year does sound kind of high. I mean, there's 365 days in a year.
It's an argument every other day.
Yeah.
Roughly.
That's a lot of arguments.
I don't know.
I don't know if me and Sam have that many arguments.
Now, what constitutes an argument?
That's another question.
Is it like a little like we disagree on, who's going to brush your teeth first?
Right.
Like, is that considered like a little squabble? Is that an argument? Or are we talking about full-blown?
Like an argument.
Yeah, it's like, hey, dig in. We're going to be here a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Judah, what would you say?
I can't speak to this.
You can't.
I'm not married.
You have siblings.
That's right.
You tell me you never argue with your siblings?
No, never.
Okay. Yeah.
Judah also has found perfection in his relationships.
Yes.
Apparently.
That's true. Last week, I think he said that he had 0 bad relationships.
Yeah.
So, anyways, so 182, it does seem a little high.
Mm-hmm.
It's every other day. So my guess is it can't be full-blown arguments.
No.
Like
who has time and energy for that?
Right.
If you have 182 full-blown arguments like that are serious, man, that, it kind of brings into question, did you pick your spouse well?
Yeah,
did you? I mean, you're married now, so,
Yeah.
But it's like, man, that would be a lot, and that would be draining.
Too, yeah. If you're talking about significant arguments, which makes me think it's probably like even like little squabbles.
Like, oh, I thought I told you to take out the trash
Right,
this morning.
right.
And like, well, I'll get around to it when I please.
Yeah, and then 30 seconds later, you forget that you even
Right,
have
right.
the conversation.
Right, exactly.
So I'm thinking that all of this is like for other people. Me and Randy never argue ever at
Sure,
all.
sure.
We have polite conversations in which we maybe disagree.
So what I'm hearing is we need to have Randy on as a guest. She can either confirm or not some of these statements.
Me and Randy are so in tune that even when we argue, it's resolved immediately.
Man.
We both come to the same conclusion immediately.
Yeah, it sounds just like a dream.
Yeah. Okay. Before I incriminate myself a little too much.
Right.
Anyways, on average, 182 arguments, which, by the way, average is the average, right? So that means there's people like me and Randy who argue 0% of the time, but then there's people that argue way more than that.
That must be like an everyday argument then to sort of make that average out.
Yeah. Anyways, okay.
In 3 solid days of arguments. That's 3 24-hour periods is what that amounts to. Like,
It's a lot of arguing.
like, can we just, like, I don't know, it's the new year. Can we just get all the arguing out of the way? Like the January
Just the
1st,
first
2nd,
3
3rd,
days.
we're just going to be in intense disagreements and arguments and things. And then the rest of the year is just all great. It's like, what was those, the Purge movies where the premise is, crime is actually redefined as not crime for like 24 hours
for
or
24
something.
hours,
And the
everything is legal.
Yeah, the idea then is, oh, well, for the rest of the year, then there won't be any crime. Like, sure, whatever.
Yeah. Well, so I can't remember who it was. I was hearing someone speak, and they were talking about how they structured their arguing or disagreements with their spouse is that they would argue on, I think it was like Friday night or Saturday night, whatever. There was a day of the week that they would argue.
For real?
Yeah. And they were not allowed to argue any other day of the week. And so, let's say something happened on Monday that would start up a little squabble. They would table it and say, okay, Friday night, 6 p.m., we'll go in the room. And that was one of their big things is that they didn't want to argue in front of their kids. And so 6 p.m. Friday or whatever, they go to their room and they would, whatever those week's conflicts were, they would argue about those. And he said one of the things that worked well with that is that there were so many like minuscule arguments that didn't need to be, that didn't matter, that by the time it got to that Friday, they forgot what it was.
Right.
Or they were over it and it wasn't a big deal. And so it was an interesting thing. Maybe me and Randy should try that. Well, me and Randy don't argue.
Yeah,
So,
who are you kidding? And that's for sure. That's a thing. Kind of letting tempers sort of air out a little bit. I'm sure I've told you this story before, but when I was teaching high school, one of the things that I really liked to do with the kids was I'd mess with them sometimes just to keep things fresh. And so there was one time there was this girl who, and by the way, anytime that you let them go to the bathroom, like after you get done like direct teaching, lecturing, those kinds of things before they do their work, they come back unmotivated to do anything else. So, but anyway, this girl one time asked to go to the restroom. And I said, no, why don't you get your work done first? And, you could kind of tell it wasn't an emergency or, anything like that. And so I'm sitting back working at my desk, and she asked again a little while later, in like 5 minutes maybe. I'm like, no, are you done with your work? No, okay. So then what I decided to do was just innocently pull up a clip on YouTube of 10 hours of Niagara Falls. And might have played it on the projector screen.
coincidentally.
Right, that's right.
Had nothing to do with the situation.
Right, and anyway, so I just kind of I hit the play button and just kind of smiled, and watched. And she got up and left and went to the bathroom. I don't blame her. You're right. I would have done the same thing. It's all good. But man, I got an email from her parents. It was like right at 4:00 or 4:30. We want to meet tomorrow. Yeah. She was worried about being in trouble for leaving, and I'm like, I was messing with her, anyway. And so, but man, you could tell they were mad, and we want to meet tomorrow after school. And I'm like, let me check my calendar. Flips pages. No, I don't have anything until middle of next week. And so I pushed the meeting. I'm like, man, maybe you need to like calm down just a little bit first. And they still weren't real happy with me, but at least they weren't. It wasn't explosive anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, I could get myself in trouble sometimes.
Yeah,
but it was fun.
Yep. So we bring up all this marital and conflict and your relationship distress, and Pastor Lee brought up these statistics mainly for the reason of whenever there's like conflict like that, whenever there's especially like chronic conflict, it can very quickly turn into like toxic levels. And whenever it turns into like toxic relationships, it will not only affect you and your spouse or whoever it is in the relationship, but also there's like a wake that forms behind you, affecting everyone else. And that's, he mentioned in the studies that children who aren't even part of that marital conflict, just partakers of the conflict, tend to have greater chances of disorders and things like that going on down the line, because they're in the vicinity of toxic behaviors. And it's apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Like, kids learn from their parents, and so you just kind of create this generational curse going down the hill. Anyways, so all of that is to preface the sermon of how to replace toxic behaviors with healthy ones, because we want to, for our own sake, for our spouse's sake, for the relationship's sake, for everyone's sake around us, we want to have healthy relationships in healthy ways, even when we disagree, how to go about those disagreements and things like that. So that's the preface of all this. Real quickly, I'll outline the points that Lee gave us in this, and that is how to replace toxic behaviors with healthy ones. 1, replace conflict with peace. 2, replace wrong with reconciliation. 3, replace bitterness with forgiveness. And 4, replace pride with love. All right. So this one, there's no one central verse,
right?
And so we'll go through the verses as we get there. But let's get into this first one. The first one is replace conflict with peace. And so this verse is in 2 Timothy. Do you want to go ahead and read that one?
Yes. 2 Timothy 2:23 and 24. Have nothing to do with foolish, ignorant controversies. You know that they breed quarrels, and the Lord's servant must not be quarrelsome, but kind to everyone.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to keep going. I think that's all that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see. Yeah, I'm looking at the NIV. I do like the NIV's translation on this. So what did yours say at the beginning?
Have nothing to do with foolish, ignorant controversies.
Controversies, okay. NIV says, don't have anything to do with foolish or stupid arguments.
Yeah, it's very blunt.
Yeah. There's a proverb that basically says, paraphrasing, like, don't argue with a fool. It's foolish to argue with a fool.
I wrote it down. It's Proverbs 26:4. Answer not a fool according to his folly, lest you be like him yourself.
Yeah, you just get sucked into it. Mm-hmm. And Lee mentioned that this might be one of the most ignored verses in the Bible, especially in our time with Facebook. Do you find yourself to be a Facebook commenter?
Oh my gosh. Sometimes, not as much as I used to.
You used to partake in all of the stuff?
I used to love it.
Yeah.
Way back in the day, especially, political arguments. And I'm even tempted sometimes, especially on like the All About Azel page, when somebody will post something that's just like, what are you doing? Like, I have this like impulse to just like get on there and troll people. And then I might even have something typed out and I'm like, delete. It's like, okay, I'm just going to let that one go. But, so kind of, I really used to do that more, but not so much now.
Yeah, there's only one time that I've been sucked into, not even really a debate. I was on this Facebook group, this is years ago, and I asked a question. It was actually pertaining to ministry. And there was someone that gave such a kind of like rude, snide comment that was like really passive aggressive, and it just rubbed me the wrong way. And so I like typed out this whole thing about how
wrote a book.
Yeah, pretty much about that was inappropriate and condescending to do, in which did nothing. Other than that, I think in my mind what I want to say, but I don't hardly ever actually type it out. But man, it's actually interesting to watch some of these arguments unfold. And here's the thing with a little less with Facebook, but more so with YouTube. You don't even know who you're arguing with. You could be arguing with, a 56-year-old scholar, or you could be arguing with an 11-year-old.
Right. Or maybe Chat GPT.
Yeah, you could be arguing with a bot.
You never know.
And or you could be arguing with someone who actually has no interest in the argument. They're just trolling you.
Yep.
Like that's their sole purpose, is just to make you as mad as possible. And you think to yourself, there's not actually people out there. There's people out there.
Yes.
They're like that. And so I think Facebook is a good revealer. Social media is a good revealer of how we are prone to involve ourselves in stupid and foolish arguments.
Yep.
Now, Pastor Lee basically suggested don't even engage on Facebook. Like, one, that's not a biblical approach, because when you have conflict, the more biblical approach is to go face to face and deal with it as personally as possible. Right. And Facebook is a much more public platform with spectators, and once you get spectators in there, I'm sure you dealt with this when teaching, that you would get into like a conflict with a student where they maybe wouldn't have wanted to do something or whatever it may be. And because they have an audience, their reaction changes. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you get them out in the hallway. Say, hey, go out, sit out in the hall. I'll be there in a minute. And then, their whole demeanor changes. They're more likely to listen and actually apply. That was a great tool to be able to use. And it's all back to that lack of audience. And, hey, let's just talk one-on-one, and let's have some real talk here for a minute and try to correct some of the things for your sake and the sake of your classmates. And that was much more effective than trying to, handle a classroom
have like a showdown
issue. Right.
Yeah, because then it becomes like a, establishing dominance kind of situation, in front of the entire class.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, sometimes those might be appropriate, in the classroom. It's like you got to, the kid that's thinks he's the biggest, baddest dude, and everybody else thinks he's the biggest, baddest dude. It's like prison.
You got to make an example. You got to find the biggest, baddest dude and just take him down.
Yeah, not really. But
hopefully you're...
We kid.
Yeah, and so that's for sure on the public side of things. But let's move this to like a private side. Maybe it's with your kids, or with your spouse, or with friends, or family, whatever it may be. Do you find yourself engaging in stupid and foolish arguments in your relationships?
I don't think so.
I would find 90% of mine.
Oh, really?
Are that. No, maybe.
Like what do you mean by that?
So here's what I mean by that. So when we were talking about the 180 something arguments that couples have, the majority of the disagreements me and Randy have are over things that don't matter at all. And so I would classify those as like stupid and foolish, like arguments, right? It's like the other day. So a long running bit between me and Randy is that she does not do the dishes right. Like I have a way that I do the dishes. It's very organized. It's very efficient, and she does it the complete opposite way of me, like start to finish. She couldn't do it more different than me. And the other day, have you ever done this thing where like you kind of start just having like kind of some banter with the other person, and then by the end of it, it's no longer banter. It's like you're actually upset.
Mad. Yeah.
And that happened the other day with the dishes. She did the dishes, which is awesome, by the way. Randy, I love you. She did the dishes, and she made a joke. It's like, hey, I did the dishes. I know you don't like the way I do them. And so it kind of opened up the door to banter. And so I'm like, yeah, you did it this way. And like, let's go take a look. And yeah, you didn't do it this way. And by the end of it, I started to feel myself get a little bit upset that she didn't do it the right way. And I would classify that as stupid and foolish because it doesn't matter. It really, like, the way that she did actually didn't change like the cleanliness of the dishes by any means. Like effectively, we do the same thing. And so that's what I mean of
Gotcha.
like 90% of what I get into are things that don't matter.
Yeah. My wife was very successful very early on in marriage, training me how to do dishes properly. Granted, so
Maybe I need to talk to Sam.
maybe and you can train Randy.
Yeah, to train Randy.
It was just one of those things that, I mean, growing up, like for her, all the cups go on the left side on the top, bowls go on the right side, and then you kind of fill in.
There's an order,
between.
man.
Yeah, there's an order. Well, growing up, we did it opposite in my house or my parents' house, whatever. And so cups would go on the other side. And so I think it was like the first time that I did dishes, she's like, "You did it all wrong." I'm like, "Well, how do you want me to do it?" And so she's like, "This goes here, that goes." She talked to me very slowly and used small words. But I'm
Treating you like a 5-year-old.
basically. But I think I decided at that point, I'm like, I don't care how the dishes go in there, as long as they're clean and I have dishes to use whenever I want to eat. I'm happy. Whatever. It's not worth it. It's not worth the argument for me, since it meant that much to her. So
Yeah. So that's where I think for sure in like personal relationships where this passage can apply is like, whenever you get into or whenever you find yourself getting into an argument, just ask the question, is this an argument even worth having?
Right.
Is this conflict even worth having? And some conflict is worth having.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's for sure, like, I don't even think Pastor Lee would disagree with this, that there are times that you need to disagree in your relationship and in your marriage. There's times that you need to discuss and figure out a solution. What we're getting at here is that not every argument is that.
right.
In fact, I would say the majority of arguments don't need to happen because they're not worth having, because they're foolish.
It's just little things.
It's just little things that don't matter. And it's just more of like a little like nitpicking at each other thing rather than like, here's an actual, so how to handle raising your kids.
Yeah.
Or disciplining your kids.
That's
worth talking about.
Yeah.
How you do the dishes. Probably not worth, getting into a disagreement over that unless they're just not cleaning them.
Right. Oh yeah. Then that's grounds for some serious
Right.
argument.
They got to soak, man. They got to soak.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, I'm letting them soak. Quit it. Put them in the dishwasher. It's like, I don't want to.
It's like I'm letting it soak. It's a cast iron.
Pull it out. It's totally rusted. Yeah.
Oh gosh.
And then that would breed quarrels for sure.
Now here's where I think this can shift. So Pastor Lee didn't get into this too much, but this happens a lot. You're a theological guy. I'm a theological guy. We see this happen a lot in the theological realm of people getting into stupid and foolish arguments over theology. And this almost gets into, and I can't remember if it was on this point or one of the others, that whenever you go into disagreements, how you go into the disagreement is just as important as to what you say.
That's right.
And there's different theological niches where, man, we are just so like toxic with each other and so demeaning to each other over different like nuanced theological viewpoints. And so this is Paul writing to Timothy, who was a leader, pastor of his church, and this was a personal letter to him. So a lot of what he's talking to him about is how do you go about leading your church? Mm-hmm. And one of the things he says is don't get caught up in stupid and foolish arguments.
Yep.
Like things that don't matter. And I would say one of the main things he's probably pointing to him is like theological stuff. Mm-hmm. Like theology is important, but there's things that aren't worth getting into foolish arguments over. Some of those things might be like things like in Revelation.
Oh, yeah. That's right where my mind went. It's like, just because you don't agree with somebody's view of the end times doesn't make them a heretic.
Yeah.
Right? They can be within the realm of orthodoxy, and you guys can simply disagree. And that's okay on those issues.
Yep.
For sure.
Yep.
Now, granted, there are also times when theologically there are things worth, really like those primary issues. It's worth, planting your flag in the ground and saying this is what Scripture says very clearly, and these are some things that we must believe that the Bible's told us. It's necessary for salvation and those sorts of things. That's not so much what we're talking about. It's more, those secondary, tertiary issues.
Yeah. And one thing to like keep in mind, and then this might be getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, with stupid and foolish arguments is the argument itself, like what you're discussing may not be stupid and foolish, but the way that you're approaching it may be stupid and foolish.
Right, and that applies to all arguments, right?
Yeah.
So even if we're talking about a primary theological issue, I mean, it even says a little bit further down in 2 Timothy 2, the Lord's servant must not be quarrelsome, but kind to everyone, able to teach, patiently enduring evil, correcting his opponents with gentleness. God may perhaps grant them repentance leading to a knowledge of the truth. It's like, so even there.
That's what I say every time someone disagrees with me.
Yeah, that's right. It's like,
May the Lord give you grace.
That's right. God will change your mind for me.
Yeah, and so that's important. Whether you're having a theological disagreement, a marital disagreement, friendship disagreement, work disagreement, what you're arguing about may be worthwhile. But if you're approaching it from a foolish mindset, and by foolish mindset meaning like you're unwilling to hear any other opinion, you're already set in your opinion, then maybe you're approaching it wrong. Because in disagreements, especially marital disagreements, the goal isn't to fully convince them that you're right. The goal is to hear them out.
Yeah, that's right. Let's talk about that one.
Oh yeah,
like Pastor Lee mentioned, arguments in relationships. Even when you're right, you're wrong.
Yeah.
It's like, isn't that true in a lot of ways? Like,
I mean, not for me. But,
oh, sure.
But yeah,
okay. For me, for sure. And it took me a while to learn this. We've been married 10 years now. And
we've only been married 5, so maybe I just haven't learned it yet.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
So, I think there have been times where I'm like, I know that I'm right on this, whatever it is that we're arguing about, and I can show it. And I can count on one hand, probably with like 1 or 2 fingers, how many times that I've actually got my wife to admit that she was wrong and that I was right. I mean, it doesn't happen often. When it does happen, we erect a plaque on the wall. At this place, at this time, she admitted that I was right, kind of a thing. But
sounds like you're setting yourself up to be brought up later on in one of these points.
Right.
Continue.
The point is, like, okay, yes, I was right, but I'm still sleeping on the couch. Why am I sleeping on the couch? I thought I won. It's like, because you might have won the argument, but the way that you go about arguing it really, really makes a big difference.
You got a smile on your face as you're like covering up on the couch.
Yeah, that's right. I might be out in the doghouse sleeping with the dogs, but at least I won.
Yeah.
Like, that's not what we want. That's not peace.
Which is for sure not the, and this we're going to use that to go into point 2. That's for sure not the way we want to go about conflict. We want to not go in trying to get our way, but rather go in for reconciliation, which brings us to our second point. So first point is replace conflict with peace. The second point is to replace wrong with reconciliation. And so Pastor Lee mentioned Matthew 5. Do you want to go ahead and read that one?
This is verses 23 and 24. So if you are offering your gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First, be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gift.
Yep. So reconciliation, which just a big word to say like resolving conflict.
That's right.
Like to resolve and to reestablish the relationship back to the way it needs to be.
Yeah, to come back together again, basically.
And we mentioned this a few weeks ago and maybe even last week, that the whole purpose of the gospel is to restore our relationship with God, to reunite us with God. However, a secondary purpose of that is to reunite us with each other. We're restoring ourselves not with just God, but we're restoring our relationship with each other as well. That's part of the gospel, which is why Jesus said in the Lord's Prayer, if you don't forgive others, you'll not be forgiven, because your ability to forgive others is a direct demonstration of have you been forgiven by the Father.
Yep. Amen.
And so this is really important. Like more important than I think we even understand to God is that He doesn't just want us to be in a right relationship with Him, but us to be in a right relationship with each other. Which is why He said, if you're worshiping me, if you're coming and bringing something to me, a gift, an offering, but you're at odds with your brother over here, stop.
Yeah,
I don't want it. go over here. And this is something that I think we can wrap our minds around, but when you have kids, you really can wrap your minds around it. Lottie and Judson are like 3.5 and 1. And so they haven't quite gotten to this point yet that they're like at odds with each other.
It's coming.
Yeah, right. But they do have that time where, Judson will, try to grab something of Lottie's, and Lottie will like, no.
Yeah, that's mine.
Yeah. But it hasn't like full blown into like actual conflict yet. But I imagine, and you might be able to speak more on this, is that whenever there's conflict between them, it actually creates it doesn't necessarily, well, let's see, how do I want to say this? Like, I might be in a right relationship with Lottie, but if she's not in a right relationship with Judson, it affects my relationship with her, not in the sense of me and her conflict, but in the sense of like no, like it's not just me and you, it's me and or it's us,
right,
together. And so I want you to be in the right relationship with your brother, and that's actually going to enhance my relationship with you, because now we're like all in this together, not just like you and you, and then can you speak more of that?
Yeah, definitely.
Since you have older kids,
right? So especially the older kids, Joni, she's still 3, so she still gets away with a lot. But the older kids, especially whenever one of them does something to hurt the other one, when they have a disagreement or a conflict, and it gets blown out of proportion, right? And they can get physical with each other sometimes. It's like this one does this, then this one, they escalate at each step, and then all of a sudden it's this big thing. First off, it makes me angry when they go about hurting each other, or even doing things that are just like, why? What are you even doing? But then, and so yes, that does affect my relationship with whichever one it is that really took it too far. And then the trick is to go about helping them to restore their relationship. So like you said, our whole relationship as a family can be restored and at peace, and we can enjoy each other that way. So that's a thing. Yeah.
Well, it's one of those things that, let's say they are at odds with each other, and then they come like snuggle up to you, and it's like, no, don't pretend that everything's okay.
Get away from me.
Yeah,
what are you doing?
Not everything's okay.
Right.
Y'all need to go figure this out.
Yeah, and normally when that happens, and it doesn't happen often, the older kids, and really all 3 of ours, play super well together, and they normally get along. So it doesn't happen often, but when it does, when it gets to that point, one of them is going to go sit in their room for a little bit and think about it, while I calm down over here, give myself a little time to breathe so I don't do anything I'm going to regret. And then, that's the next step, is to go and, hey, let's have a conversation. And let's talk through what happened. And sometimes it's not even really clear what happened and who's in the wrong. And anyway, but trying to mediate that between them is good for the peace and of the whole family.
Well, and that's the goal, is like whenever there's conflict, reconciliation. Right. So I don't know if Pastor Lee mentioned this, but Matthew 18 gives a very clear path to how to deal with conflict. And one of the first ones is to go find, like if your brother has something, to go find them in private and try to resolve that. And if, I think it says, if your brother recognizes his sin, you have won your brother, or something along those lines. One of the things it doesn't say is, if your brother hears you, then you've won the argument.
Right.
That's not the goal. The goal isn't to win the argument. The goal is to win your brother back. And that's one of the biggest, I think, misnomers of conflict and having those conversations, is the goal isn't for you to be right. The goal isn't for you to even communicate your wrongs or what's been wrong to you. The goal is to work together to have reconciliation. And what that means sometimes is that you're going to be fully heard. And what that means sometimes is that you're going to have to be the hearer. Because usually, I would say 90% of conflict is like miscommunication.
Yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah, and so it's like you say something and you meant it one way, but they heard it a different way, and then now we're just kind of at odds with each other. And so sometimes it's, if let's say I come to you and I'm like, hey, you said this, and I didn't appreciate that, and they're like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it that way. Well, now at this point, I can like dig in and say, no, you did mean it that way.
Right.
Or I can just like, okay, let's meet together. It's like, maybe I did have wrong in this. Maybe I misheard it. Maybe I need to shift how I'm perceiving things and communicate to you. To maybe you can shift how you say things. That's usually how it is in our alleged conflicts at home. Maybe I just don't have the greatest tone when I say something. Anyways, so the goal is to be reconciled, not to be right, because if you're right, maybe you're right on the couch.
Right. And Pastor Lee talked about, he gave an illustration. I think it was this point where he's getting navigational instructions from his wife, Cherry.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And, this is our exit. And he's, nope, sure isn't. It's the next one. And turns out she was right. And so really in the aftermath of that, like, you're both in the same car. You're both going to have to go down to the next exit and turn around anyway. So then whoever it was that was right, how did they respond? How did they react to that? And he mentioned, oh, she could throw that in my face or not. It's one of those things. And so that it really... that story and that illustration really resonated with me because my wife is normally the navigator when we drive anywhere. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I'm like, I don't need Apple Maps to tell me where to go to get to this place that we've been 2 times already. Mm-hmm. Like, I've got it. It's all good. And she's, well, I'm going to keep it up anyway. I'm like, you doubt me? But it's just not worth it. And then, whenever, that's like driving in Texas, you could just pass the exit sometimes, and then whoever it is that's right next to you goes, where are you going? Where are we going? And it's like, well, what do you mean? It's like, well, that was the exit back there. That's the approach sometimes, is to wait and to see if they'll actually take the correct exit. Mm-hmm. My wife's not that way.
So here's how my wife navigates. She always tells me the right exit to go, and I'm usually not opposed to receiving, direction. Yeah. Here's what will happen. We could be driving for, 20 minutes, and the exit's coming up for 20 minutes, and she'll wait until the exit's right there, and then she'll say, oh, this is your exit.
3 lanes over.
Yeah, right. So, I have 0 time. There's traffic all around me. I have 0 time to actually merge over and get in the exit.
I hate when that happens.
That's usually ours. Is like let me know earlier.
Right.
Anyways. Okay. So, the goal is to not be right. The goal is to be reconciled. Mm-hmm. So, replace conflict with peace, replace wrong with reconciliation, and 3, replace bitterness with forgiveness. And this is where it gets into what we mentioned earlier in the Lord's Prayer says, forgive others, for if you do not, the Lord will not forgive you, which is a hard statement. It's a heavy statement, and I think it's directly correlating to the grace and the forgiveness that you receive from God should be demonstrated. If you actually have been forgiven and saved by God, that should be demonstrated by you forgiving others.
Yeah, it's the parable of the unforgiving servant. Mm-hmm. The king decides to settle his debts, and so he brings in the servant that owes, 100,000 talents or something. I don't remember the amount off the top of my head, but it's like...
a talent was like a year's worth of wage, right?
Something like that. Anyway, it would be like saying $1 trillion today. It's
a ton of money.
It can't be paid back.
Your student loans.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels like it sometimes. And so the king, he calls him to account, and he's, I just need more time. And the king says, okay, not only will I give you more time, but your debt is totally forgiven. All this insurmountable debt that literally cannot be repaid. And then the same servant turns around, goes and finds his fellow servant who owes him nothing.
$50.
Right. Nothing in comparison. He has him thrown in jail after being pled with to just give him more time, and he wouldn't extend that same forgiveness that the king or the master had forgiven him. And it just showed, I mean, you get a sense of like how hard this guy's heart was in that parable. And it's the same way. It's the parable version of that part of the Lord's Prayer.
Well, and that's where so that parable that Jesus gave, like it's a tangible monetary parable, right?
Yeah.
Like we can clearly look. Here's the debt that he owed. Here's the small debt that was owed to him, and we look at them and like ridiculous, right? And I think where we have a hard time shifting it over to our relationships is everything is intangible, and we also not only do we have probably an inflated view of how we've been wronged by other people, but we have a deflated view of how we've wronged God.
Yeah.
And so I would say if you're having a hard time offering forgiveness to someone else, like even if you're met with like that passage right there, and you're still like, man, they still did this to me, and I will never forgive them of that. What maybe your problem isn't that you can't forgive the other person. Your problem maybe is that you don't have a full understanding of how much you've wronged God and have been forgiven of that. And so maybe you just need to spend some time like fully come to terms with maybe you're not a good person.
Yeah, that's right.
You may, like, you need to fully understand the weight of your sin. And when you fully understand the weight of your sin and what God has done to forgive you of that sin, now you're kind of like, now you can kind of see that parable played out in your life of like, okay, well, I've been forgiven of all of this I've done against God, and now I'm holding on to this minuscule thing. And that minuscule thing, like, I don't want to diminish that, because what they did to you may be awful. But in comparison to the eternal forgiveness that God's given you, it's nothing. Right. And so what we tend to do in those situations is bring out bitterness instead of forgiveness. And I think it was Mark Twain. Was he the one that said that bitterness is a poison for your enemies that you drink?
I don't know who said it for sure, but
anyways, I always thought that was a good quote, because whenever you hold bitterness against someone, it's not affecting them, right? Like, let's say Judah steals my cat. Actually, you can steal my cat. Please steal my cat. Do you want a
cat? We already have two, so please no.
Let's say I loved my cat and you stole my cat, and man, I'm just harboring that. Judah's just living his life, right? He's just enjoying the cat over there. I'm the only one that's being hurt by the bitterness in that situation. And so I love that statement of like, you know, in our minds, we think bitterness is this poison that we're giving to our enemies, but in reality, we're the only ones that are being affected by it. Right.
That's just, I have a problem with that illustration. Yeah. I'm not sure anybody would be that bitter over a cat. But a dog.
Okay, a dog.
Your dog, though. Man, oh, gosh. Yes.
What's your dog's name?
I've got Little Joe and Rosa. I've got two.
All right, which one do you like more?
Well, I like them both differently for different reasons. So it's kind of hard to...
Okay, let's say Judah stole both of them.
Yeah, see, now it's personal.
So sorry.
now you're like the guy shaking down the guy after you got forgiven.
Oh, yeah,
all that
that's
debt.
right. Give me my dogs back.
Yeah. It's like all Christianity goes out the window when you mess with my dogs.
Yeah, that's right. And you're right. And Lee even had a really good illustration on this point about the wife that went to go meet with a counselor or pastor or and
like therapist,
whoever it was, and she wants to hurt her husband as much as possible before she divorces him because he has just caused her so much harm. And man, I thought that was a great illustration where, hey, really answering the question of, man, I'm already so bitter. How can I go about forgiving somebody when I'm all the way over here? And what did he say? Action or motion creates emotion, I think is what he said.
That's what he said.
Or something like that, something to that effect. And so, God, he calls us to love others, to forgive others. And that's a handy tool to be able to do that, is really to go over and beyond, especially with more difficult people, and find ways to show love to them, and we may even find that our emotions follow us that way.
Yeah, well, what will tend to happen, so let's say you're wronged. So let's take a situation in a marriage, like years of wronged or apathy or whatever it may be that's brought you to a place of hurt. That's going to move one of two directions. It's not going to stay there.
Right.
You're not just going to stay in this like neutral zone after being hurt. You're going to either go one way or the other. You're either going to allow that to turn into a resentment and bitterness, or you're going to forgive them, moving into a state of like you're past it.
Right.
But it's not going to stay in the middle. It's going to go one way or the other. And so what you essentially have to do is when you're met with hurt, when you're met with conflict, you have to ask yourself, which way am I going to take this? Am I just going to harbor this and just move it into that bitterness and resentment, which will eventually, if pushed far enough, move into a retaliation standpoint, which is not uncommon for marriage. Marriage is one of like the most intimate relationships you can be in. And with intimacy comes vulnerability, and with vulnerability comes deep hurt. Like that, like there's a way that Randy can hurt me that Judah can't hurt me.
Except the cat thing.
Except the cat thing. And when people are able to be hurt deeply like that can lead to incredible resentment, bitterness, and retaliation. Yep. Anyways, so it can either move in that direction, or you can say, okay, I can process this, deal with this, and forgive them of this. Now, here's an important note. Forgiveness doesn't always mean that you have to trust them again.
Right.
Like if you're in an abusive relationship, you can forgive someone without putting yourself in abuse.
Right.
Right. Yeah, I think that's easily like misconstrued.
Right.
Forgiveness is basically saying, I'm not holding this against you anymore. Now there's relationships that I've been a part of where like I forgive you, but I don't want to talk to you. For the good of both of us, like past like ex relationships that was in this like toxic level of dysfunction, for the good of both of us, we just need to not be around each other. But I don't have any bitterness. I don't have any resentment. Man, I hope the best for them. Like I'm not at home like thinking like, how can I hurt them today?
My ex-girlfriend from 8th grade. How dare she? Hopefully not.
Yeah, forgiveness is basically saying, I'm not holding a debt over you anymore. Like if we were to move into like a literal like kind of debt relationship, forgiveness is holding a debt against them. You wronged me and now you owe me, and I'm going to hold this debt until that's dealt with. And forgiveness is basically saying, I'm going to absolve that debt.
Yep.
I'm not going to hold that debt anymore. What it doesn't mean is things have to go back to the way they were.
Right.
It just means that you're not going to hold it anymore. Anyways, I thought that was important to distinguish.
Yes. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
It's not an all or nothing thing.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, so replace bitterness with forgiveness. And then lastly, replace pride with love. Thoughts?
Well, Pastor Lee did bring up. He says the problem with this one is we're not usually very good at identifying our pride as pride.
Mm-hmm.
We tend to see our pride more as righteousness. Like, oh, we're just right,
which I can't even.
Wrong.
I can't even relate to that statement because mine is righteousness.
Oh yeah, exactly.
I don't know if I'd have to ask Randy. I don't know if I've ever had pride in my life.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe we should call her. Man, Randy keeps, we keep bringing Randy in. Maybe we should give her a call and see what she has to say about this.
No need to. I know what she would say. She would say, Chris is the most stand-up righteous guy ever, and not an ounce of selfishness in him. I mean, I've got a pre-written statement from her right here. I'm just kidding.
Oh, man, impressive. Well, I'll take things that have never happened in the history of mankind for 500, please, Alex.
Yeah. Hey, Jesus. It happened with Jesus.
Okay. One time. No, but, if you think about what pride is and then what love is, I mean, they really couldn't be more polar opposite of each other. Pride, it's all about me. It's all about the things that I want. It's all about me being right. It's all about me being puffed up with myself, where love is not about me. It's about the other person, whoever it is that we're talking about, whether it's marital relationship, family, friends, coworkers, bosses, all the different sorts of relationships that we have. And Christ really is the model for us on that, to replace pride with love. And if there was ever any, speaking, humans anyway, if there was ever anyone who was entitled to all of the things that it meant to be God the Son, right, it was Christ. However, Scripture tells us that he emptied himself. He took the form of a servant, right, to come. He came here to fulfill all righteousness, to pay the penalty for our sins on the cross, to be raised again, and then to ascend to the right hand of God the Father. And so that action really those actions altogether really demonstrate that Christ, who, again, he deserved all of these things here, he left that. He came here to love us, really, so he could be glorified again, right? He's the model, is what I'm trying to say.
Well, and that's my mind went to that passage, Philippians 2, that you just mentioned. Right before that, it says, so Philippians 2 gets into Jesus as the model of humility. And before that, it says, a command to us, do nothing out of selfish ambition or empty conceit. But in humility, consider others as more important than yourself. I think that's an interesting point in that to have a lens of love instead of pride is not just being humble whenever someone else is in the wrong, but it's actually lowering yourself to help them through that issue. So last night, we were just cleaning up the house, and there was how it always gets, there's a pile of laundry on the bed, and I was putting away the laundry, and got all the laundry put away. And for us, the majority of the stuff goes in drawers, but then there's a handful of things that have to get hung up. And I hate laundry in general, but I really hate hanging stuff up on hangers. I also, in my hatred of hanging stuff up on hangers, I typically won't do Randy's. So I'll fold up all Randy's stuff, and then there's just a pile of stuff that need to go on hangers, and I'm like, okay, she can get this. And there's a pile that's been sitting there for a little bit. And last night I was tired, and I just got done doing all that stuff, and there was just left that one pile of hers. And in my thinking, in my humble love, without trying to sound too hubris, I legitimately had the thought of, okay, in this moment, I can dump this off on her as her responsibility because it's her clothes, right? Or I can do a kindness to her, lower myself, and hang up the stuff for her and put it up. And I would like to say I did that. Good job.
Yes, you did it.
It only took me a month. But it was one of those things where it was actually a really hard moment in my mind, because I'm left with two options. I can do what is well within my rightful duty to do, is to be okay, I've done all my part, I'm going to go sit down. Or I can, humble myself and say, it's not just about looking out for what I'm supposed to do. It's also looking out for the better of others. Right. And if that means taking 5 minutes to hang up clothes, that's a small price to pay.
Oh, yeah.
Compared to Jesus on the cross.
Oh, yeah. So I don't think she's, I think maybe she's given up. My wife has. But used to, before we moved, she used to have her clothes that were hanging up, ordered by color. But the problem is, if you guys don't know, men and women see colors very, very differently. Oh, have you seen the spectrum?
You talk about stupid and foolish arguments. Yeah. This is one of those ones that me and my wife have gotten into.
Yeah,
of what is blue and what is gray.
Right, or green or whatever. And so I even, whenever I taught world geography, I would even and I would talk to the kids like right out of the gate. I'm like, listen, your geography teacher this year, I am a man. Here is an image showing color spectrums, right? And so on one side, there's an image. It's here's how men see colors, and it's red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, whatever. And then on the other side, is how women see colors, and it's red, orange, gray, whatever. Like all the little violet, purple, light purple, lavender, and there's like 20 different colors for like one color. Mm-hmm. So I had to make it very clear for them. I'm like, because when you're coloring maps, you can't color two countries that are adjacent to each other the same color, mm-hmm. right? And so I learned the first year I taught geography that the girls were like, oh, that's not red and red, that's red and whatever the other Cucumber. Made up color was, yeah. And so, so long story short, I used to go and hang her clothes up, put them on hangers, and then I would put them in the wrong place. And I'd hear about it. And but now
it sounds like I'm the Sam in your relationship.
Like it's flipped. The thing is now I think after being married for 10 years, I think she's just happy now that I put some of her clothes away sometimes, and so I don't hear about it anymore. Mm-hmm. It's either she's either given up on me or something.
She's just lowered her expectations.
Yeah, that's right. She's like, this is my life now. Yep. I'm just going to live without my
This is my
clothes.
cross to carry.
Yeah, ordered by color or whatever. And so
every night she prays that she can humble herself and look out for the good of you.
Oh, yeah. That's right. Yeah. But I mean...
And you're just sleeping.
Yeah, that's right. Oh man, it's a journey. The whole thing's a journey, isn't it?
Yes. So replace pride with love, and if you can do this, if you can try to find a way to like head off your pride, and have a mindset of not how do I get everything my way, but rather a mindset of how do I look out for the good of others and love others. 90% of arguments are gone.
Yeah, that's right.
You don't have to worry about it anymore because you're no longer walking through life figuring out how do I get people to align with me. You're wondering how do I serve others? How do I care for others?
Right.
And sometimes that means that I'm quote unquote wronged. Mm. There's a proverb that says it's to a man's glory to overlook an offense. Mm. And I have to tell myself that all the time, that if I get like just offended by some little thing over here, I have to remind myself it's to a man's glory to overlook an offense. I'm not going to get upset about something nitpicky over here that doesn't matter.
Here's a good principle to live by. I think I've heard my uncle say this multiple times.
Happy wife, happy life?
No. No. This is a little different. It was, okay, before you speak, and we'll apply it back to arguments and relationships and things, but before you speak, you have to think to yourself, is what I'm about to say an improvement on the silence, or is the silence preferable? So it's kind of the same way. It's
stepping on my toes over here.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. So the question is, it's like, when you've been wronged or feel as if you've been wronged, and maybe you're sitting there with a friend or a spouse or whoever, and you're just kind of sitting in silence or whatever. It's like, and you just have that impulse, especially when it's something little, not worth fighting about. It's like, is the silence preferable, or is what I'm about to say preferable? It's just a good principle.
Do you ever do that whenever something like little that doesn't matter happens, and you're having a conflict in your mind?
Yeah.
You're like, do I say it? Do I say, Chris, don't say it?
Yeah, that's right.
Chris, this isn't worth it. Don't say it.
And then you blurt it out.
It. You're like, oh.
Yeah.
And then you immediately regret it. Like, I shouldn't have said that.
And then it opens up this big can of worms, and then your 25-minute average argument, that's all like way left in the rearview mirror. Yeah. Now we're on an hour and a half long argument. Yeah.
We need to bring our wives on, and we can just like have Randy and Sam just do this podcast, and then they can like give you all the other side to all these stories.
Oh, dude, I don't know about that. Let's be careful what we wish for. I was thinking more along the lines of you and I will sit in the middle, and our wives can sit on the outside.
I don't want to be in the middle.
I don't want them to sit next to each other because then they'll team up.
I want to not be part of that, because then they'll bring up stuff and I'm like, I have no justification for what I did, and I don't want.
They'll both just stare.
At that point, you just plead the fifth.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You can't plead the fifth in your marital relationships. It doesn't work that way.
It's like they say something, and you're like, silent, or what I would say would not improve on the silence.
Right,
So
and
I'm just going to be silent.
Right, but then you know what they're going to shoot back with is, were you even listening to me? And then
then you just say, no comment.
Yeah, right. I invoke my Fifth Amendment privilege.
All right, this is going downhill fast.
Yeah, it is.
All right.
It sure is.
Anyways, so that's the second part of how to reset your relationships. Primarily speaking, this week, Pastor Lee talked about how to replace toxic behaviors with healthy ones. 4 ways to do that is to replace conflict with peace, to replace wrong with reconciliation, to replace bitterness with forgiveness, and to replace pride with love. Man, I hope that in y'all's relationships, and ours as well, that we can apply these things, so that way we don't involve ourselves in stupid and foolish arguments. But rather, whenever there's times that we do disagree, it's on things that are worthwhile, and we do so in a manner of love.
Yep.
All right.
Amen.
All that being said, it's time for Bad Doctrine of the Week. Jacob, what do we got?
Okay, here's the headline. It's going to take a little bit of just a little explanation past the headline. The headline doesn't do it all.
I'm going to lean back then.
Okay. All right. So this is from the Spectator, which is some kind of a magazine or publication in the United Kingdom. So here's the title: Is the Church of England giving up on Sunday worship? Mm-hmm. And so there's I think it's their women's soccer team
I'm sorry, before we get going, why is it always women's soccer?
I don't know.
It's always women's soccer that puts themselves in the middle of conflict.
Well, yeah, I had a comment, but I think I'm just gonna.
It wouldn't improve on the silence.
No, it would not improve upon the silence. So we'll just move on. But man, the Lionesses, which is based on the article, I don't know anything about like international soccer, mostly because I don't want to. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so I think the Lionesses are the England ladies soccer team. But there was an unfortunate conflict of timing, which meant that just as England's women's football/soccer team were limbering up to kick the first ball in Australia, church services in England were launching into their first hymn. And so the Church of England came out and said, I know, this is a quote, I know lots of people will want to watch the match live. That's fine from the Church of England's point of view. Others will prefer to go to church and avoid knowing the score until they can watch the match on catch-up, and that is fine too. Church services happen at different times at different places, so people can choose one that is right for them, said Libby Lane, the Church of England's first woman bishop, now appointed the church's spokeswoman on sports. And so, sort of the...
Sorry, read that again? That last statement?
So said Libby Lane, the Church of England's first woman bishop, now appointed the church's spokeswoman on sport.
The church has a spokesperson on sports?
Evidently, and her name's Libby Lane.
Why don't we have that? Judah, do you want to be our official spokesperson on sports?
Easy, we already have that.
Yeah?
We have Michael, right?
Is he our official spokesperson on sports?
He might be now, unless Judah wants the job.
I know nothing about sports, so
like do we get enough press inquiries of like, what's your thoughts on the latest game?
Right.
Well, First Baptist's official position is go Cowboys.
Right.
Anyway, sorry.
Yeah,
I just found that funny.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's an interesting position that exists.
How do you even get that position?
Yeah, it's a great question. But the article goes on. It says, it isn't difficult to see why no one wants the church to look like a bunch of miserablest killjoys. And in this, Bishop Lane might be channeling Charles I. His book of sports, published in 1633, rebuked the Puritans for their prohibiting and unlawful punishing of our good people for using their lawful recreations and honest exercises upon Sundays. So the issue is, basically, is it okay to miss church to go watch women's soccer for them?
That's only so. So did they cancel church, or did they just say?
I think they came out and said, if you want to go watch the soccer game, go for it. If you want to come to church, okay.
Yeah.
I saw multiple articles, and some of them kind of made it seem like some services just weren't going to happen that morning on Sunday morning. Others were more like this, where it was kind of a, they didn't come out and explicitly say that.
Yeah. So this is rather applicable to right now because football's about to start up.
Yep.
Now, luckily for us here at First Baptist, we have 2 services. We have 9 a.m. and 10:30 a.m. every day. So let's say you're a person who does want to watch the game kick off at 12 and you want to be there with plenty of time. You can just go to the 9 a.m. service and then you don't have to worry about it. But let's say that wasn't the case. And you just have to completely miss service because you want to go watch this game. Is that okay? So I don't want to be legalistic and say like there's never a chance. There's never a moment that you should ever miss a service because then that just kind of it creates a weird precedent. It would always go back to motive. I think is the case. It always goes back to motive because like let's even pull it off of sports. Let's say there's a time that like I was going to go meet up with my family for lunch, and because I was going to go meet up with my family, it's going to be a busy day. I just decided not to go to church that day. Is that okay? Let's say I never work on Sundays, but my work called a special Sunday meeting. And I'm going to have to miss church. Is that okay? It's like there's all these like weird exceptions to the rules. And I think it always goes back to motive of like, okay, is there an extenuating circumstance that's out of the norm and you need to miss congregating with the church for that? So by default, I would say, do your very best to always congregate with the church. Mm-hmm. I think that should always be the default position. And the reason for that isn't out of some duty. And it's not out of like I'm supposed to go to church on Sunday and there's never a reason I can't ever miss. I think it's out of the gospel, right?
Right.
The gospel, again, isn't just restoring your relationship with God, it's restoring your relationship with each other. And church... the church congregating together is us coming together, like we talked about a few weeks ago, to come declare what God has done, to fellowship together, and to grow closer together, us and the Lord closer together. And I think that needs to be a high priority. In fact, in our membership class here, we really lean into that of like that is a high priority here. And so the next question is, okay, so there's a high priority there. Next question is, okay, what extenuating circumstances are going to meet that threshold to where it's okay to miss? Let's start there. What's your thoughts on that? What would be an appropriate threshold?
Especially something that is a probably like a one-off. Like this is going to happen once in a lifetime, and I'm not talking about sports games.
Just in general.
Generally. Granted, I'm not a huge NFL fan. Like, I don't mind watching it if it's on, but I'm not going to go out of my way. I like my college football, which happens Saturdays, not Sunday. So it's really not a big issue for me. But if there was going to be a game played Sunday, I would record it. I don't feel like sports is a really good reason to go about missing on a Sunday, unless if you're going to. If you have to travel or something like that and just can't make it back or something like that. But like, hey, you have there's a family member that is getting married and you've got to be out of town or something like that on a Saturday, and there's just no way to make it back Sunday. That would be something that it's a one-off. It's not like this is going to be every week for the next 3 months.
16 weeks.
Yeah, something like that. Maybe.
Because if that's the case, so let's pull it back into sports and like NFL. If you're going to take off every single Sunday, for the next 16 weeks, then that kind of brings into the question of like, okay, are you placing a higher priority on a sport
Right.
than you are on God and the church?
Right. And it's like, who are you gathering together with? Right? Are we gathering together with the church, or are we going to go to the stadium and gather with all the sports
Now, what if
fans
you
and-
get a bunch of other guys from the church to come gather
go
with
with
you,
you?
and during halftime you do a devotional?
Does that count? As church?
Probably not.
It's
Judah
like-
says yes.
It's like
Judah's
okay.
all about
I'm all for it. Yeah.
It's like yes, we even brought our communion elements here.
A guy pulls out a guitar.
Right. Meanwhile, there's a guy behind you celebrating a touchdown, like throwing his beer around. And, anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a good question. There are definitely some. I would say some gray areas, but yeah, the overarching rule should be like we don't neglect to gather together.
Yeah, so yeah, and I think it all goes back to motive, and that's what Jesus did.
Yeah.
Jesus always pulled it back to the motive. Is there an extenuating circumstance in which you're not placing this circumstance over God, but it's just logistics just made it? But is this an ongoing circumstance where you're demonstrating in your heart that you're placing a higher priority on something other than God and His church?
Right.
I think those are good questions to ask. Let's move it out of sports because this is like a real life thing that happened this past year. I think Christmas happened on a Sunday. Is that right?
Yes.
This past year, and there was this great big debacle of churches canceling service, like just flat out canceling service. And it sounds weird because then the reason on the surface is, hey, today's the day that we celebrate Jesus being born into this world. Therefore, we're not going to gather together to worship Jesus.
It's like, happy birthday, Jesus. Sorry your party's so
Yeah,
lame.
right. It just so me, like, I understood the complete logistics of it, and I had a friend that vehemently disagreed with me on this. I understand the logistics of traditionally Christmas is a family event, and everyone's traveling, everyone's doing all these different things and get-togethers. And if you have, if you're married, you may have like your own Christmas, and then you have to go over here to this grandma's Christmas and this grandma's
Oh gosh,
Christmas.
don't get me started.
Yeah, and so that day is hectic. I get it. I get the logistics of it. And that's the argument for it is this is a crazy day. Let's not make anyone's day even more crazy. Let's just choose to worship within your family. And that was usually what they would encourage is just worship together with your family and go about your day. There's just a lot of cognitive dissonance for me there of you have Jesus who, like you said earlier, was at the highest level and humbled himself to become a person. Mm-hmm. The greatest inconvenience of all time Jesus took. Yet we have a hard time inconveniencing our day that we celebrate that great inconvenience to even disrupt our day a little bit to go to church and gather together with his body. Yeah. That's the problem that I have with it.
And I really like what we did here. Hey, we're having service. If you're traveling or if you're out of town or whatever because you're visiting family that week, so be it. Mm-hmm. But we're going to be here and we're going to gather together with those that are here. Mm-hmm. And I liked that. I liked that we did that that way, for sure. And
there's for sure like creative solutions to this. So like let's say like on the NFL thing, it starts at 12. Well, we have 9 a.m. service.
Right.
Just go to 9 a.m. service.
Right.
And, it's a non-issue.
Yeah, and let's be honest. 9 a.m. is not that early, especially for rabid football fans.
Yeah.
So I would just like to point out, during my time at Texas Tech University, right, and we all know Cowboys fans are like way up here, right, as far as fans go. Texas Tech, anytime that there would be an 11 a.m. kickoff game, you could get up early, go get some breakfast or whatever, and kind of get around. Dude, there would be people tailgating, like full on tailgating, and it's like 7:30 in the morning because they've got a pregame before the game, right? That's the whole point of a tailgate is hey, we're going to eat food. There's people even drinking beer at 7:30 in the morning. It's like
they're going to start speaking in tongues.
Like, oh my gosh, what are y'all doing? And
it was a Pentecost joke.
Yeah, that was funny.
Just in case anyone missed it.
Yeah, I got it. I thought it was good. But it's like if they can, if Texas Tech fans even can get up and be tailgating at 7:30, surely we can make it to church by 9.
Right. Yeah. So all in all, for sure don't want to set a hard and fast rule where the Bible doesn't set hard and fast rules.
Right.
But if you're a person who is choosing something over a church service or gathering together with the body of Christ, just be very introspective.
Yeah.
And just ask yourself, am I making this over here a higher priority than God and His church? And if it's one of those things that there's just no way around it, like you have to do this thing, then just ask yourself, okay, is there creative solutions around this? And so, if for whatever reason, Christmas is on Sunday, and I even have a problem with this, but let's just create a creative solution to Christmas being on Sunday. What if we had our church service on Saturday?
Right.
And we just decide together as a church we're going to have church on Saturday. I would choose that. I would still find it a weird cognitive dissonance to cancel service on the day for that reason. But at the very least, that they're creating a creative solution to where we're still going to gather together as the body of Christ and celebrate this day.
Right.
We're just going to do it one day early.
Yeah, and I really like that we did meet on Christmas. Partly for that reason, it's Christmas.
Yeah,
for crying out loud. This is the whole point. Jesus is the reason for the season.
Right. Yeah, you can't say Jesus is the reason for the season and then just cancel
church. It's messed up. But if you and there's people that we have in the church members, faithful church members who they can't come on Sunday, right? So what do? They come on Wednesday, right? And so it's like, if you know that, hey, I've got to work this Sunday, make the Wednesday service, make it a priority to be here and to gather together with God's people and all that.
Or even the online thing. And we tell all of our members, online services are great. They're not a replacement by any means, but a short term, like you're out of town,
right? Or you're sick,
it's a great supplement to kind of help you in that extenuating circumstance. We certainly don't recommend it as a long-term solution, because you're not physically congregating with the body of Christ. Homebound, obviously, there's some extenuating circumstances there, but we're talking about the general person who has the ability to get here. Right. And so there are creative solutions. But again, just always go back to what's the motive.
Right. And so in this article, the motive on the Church of England's side for not wanting to sort of take any sort of a hardline response wasn't, it had nothing to do with Scripture. It was, no one wants the church to look like a bunch of miserablest killjoys. It's like, we don't want people to think that we're lame. So go watch soccer or whatever.
Yeah.
It's
and that's
head scratcher.
That's the hard thing, because the church isn't. People use this argument all the time in trying to get the church to adjust its doctrinal beliefs. Is like you gotta keep up with the times. If you don't with the times, people are just gonna abandon you and not stay up with you. And the goal of the church isn't to be fun. I think I have some of the funnest times of my life in church.
Yep.
But the goal isn't to be fun. The goal is to call people out of their life of sin into a life of holiness with God.
Yeah.
And sometimes if that means hey, you need to lower your priority of sports below God. Wow, that looks really unfun. But that's calling people to a life of full surrender to God.
Right.
No one has to give up sports.
Right.
But again, it's just asking yourself, am I making sports an idol?
Right. And for the record, as far as the church having to try to keep up with the times, let's not forget, time revolves around the church, okay? I mean, what happened in the year 1 AD? Oh, just Jesus came and was born, right? The entire church, our entire calendar is based on Christ. And
now, if I was to be a stickler on history here, it was more like 3 or 4 BC.
Okay.
Is that right?
Yes. Okay. So there was a monk in the 4th century that calculated. He got really close. Okay.
Yeah.
But those are the numbers that we've gone with this far, and we've done okay.
point stands.
Yeah, that's right. Y2K wasn't a total meltdown.
Right.
So for those of us that remember.
Oh, yes. Y2K.
Yeah, good times.
And then 2012.
Yep.
And then there's, I'm sure, another one. Anyways.
Yeah.
All right. Well, fun. Well, we're not canceling services anytime soon, hopefully.
That's good.
All right. Y'all got anything else?
Nope. We're all good.
All right, cool. All right, well, we are so glad that y'all joined us here today for the Digging Deeper podcast. Just a quick reminder that to subscribe, like, comment, do all those things. Let us know, what you thought about conversations today. Do you argue with your spouse 182 times a year? Hopefully not. But let us know how you handle arguments or anything else you want to talk about. We'd love to read it. We are glad y'all joined us. We'll see y'all next week.